Recording. Recording in progress. So let me take a quick screenshot so I can get everybody for attendance. And let's get rolling. So the first part of lecture, we talked about soft lighting. We talked about the different kinds of soft lights. We talked about the lighting compass and also the portrait lighting guide and what our replacement lights in CG would be for those lights listed in the portrait lighting guide. So let's talk a little bit about now how we're going to approach doing this lighting. Another screenshot. We got Jackson just came in and make sure I get everybody for attendance. All right, so I've got nobody here on campus. So rather than have Frank and Ari come in to an empty room, we're going to be doing our campus labs from Zoom. Had anybody planned on coming into campus for lab? Because if not, like I said, I'm going to have them stay home. It doesn't make sense to come into an empty room. So, Ion, Blaine, Derek, Katerina, anybody? Michael said, nope, he's not coming in. Okay. Will, Kayvon, Yangi, anybody plan on coming into campus for lab? Jackson, how about you? Kaylee said, thought about it, but probably not. Ion wasn't, Janelle wasn't. He'll be back Wednesday, Jackson. Okay, fair enough. All right, so rather than have Frank and Ari come into an empty room, they're going to be working from home for the Zoom labs. Lab will start at the usual time. All right, so I'm going to notify them that they do not need to come in. They will run from home. Okay, so let's get started. So we talked about, like I said, the lighting compass, the portrait lighting guide. We talked about the different kinds of light that were used in the portrait lighting guide. So we did make reference to a little bit about light elevation, where we were looking at how high up the light was based on the shadow from the nose and where the highlight showed up in the eye. Now, kind of a rule of thumb, if your shadows are too long, your light is too low. So in my top example here, this is our still life scene, just kind of a perspective pullback from it. You can see my light is very low. In fact, it is blowing out the background or the backdrop that our still life is sitting on. And my shadows are super long. When I raise the light up, notice the shadows get less long. And the light is not affecting the backdrop as much. Now, we can use, when we have multiple lights, we can use something called light linking, which is found in the relationship editor in Maya. Let me fire up Maya. Wait for RenderMan to load, Arnold to load, then we can talk about Maya. Come on. This is where you play the Jeopardy theme in your head whenever you're waiting for something to load or not load. All right, there we go. All right, so most editors can be found under the Windows menu. Here's your editors right here in the editors section. We got general, modeling, animation, rendering, relationship editor. This is what we are interested in, because in the relationship editor, if you go down, there is a light linking section, and you have a choice of light-centric or object-centric. So I have no lights in my scene. In fact, let's go ahead and create a simple polyplane and a sphere. So notice they pop up in my relationship editor. So let's just do a sphere. I'm not even going to move these around, and let's throw in an Arnold area light. And then let's throw in a Maya spotlight, just for fun. So this is purely to show you how the relationship editor works. I'm not going to demo anything with this right now. So under Windows, relationship editors, light linking, I go to light centric. That shows me the lights I have on the left side and my geometry on the right. Whenever you create a scene in Maya, all geometry is automatically linked to all lights. Just like when you create a new mesh in Maya, it automatically gets Lambert 1. That is the default mesh, or I'm sorry, the default material. Now, when you create a new light, it is automatically linked to every piece of geometry. That is the default. Create a new mesh, it's automatically linked to any lights that are in your scene. How do you know? Well, in my relationship editor, if I select the area light, you can see that it is linked up or connected, because they're highlighted, to my polyplane and my polysphere. If I select the spotlight, the same thing. Now, if I want to unlink something from a light, for example, the spotlight, say I don't want to link up the sphere. So with the spotlight selected, I can simply click on the sphere once, left click, and now it is disconnected and unhighlighted. So if I go back to my area light, it's affecting both objects, but my spotlight only has the sphere disconnected from it. The plane is still connected. So now I can do the opposite for the area light. And this is just a demonstration in how this works. So I can come in here and I can go, okay, well, let me see, I disconnected the spotlight from the sphere. Let's disconnect the area light from the plane. Now, if I want to connect them again, all I do is click again. Now my spotlight's connected to everything. Same thing with my area light. So it's really, really simple. Now, what's the difference between light-centric and object-centric? Well, it shows you everything reversed. On the left side, if you select a piece of geometry, it shows you the lights that are linked to it. It does exactly the same thing. You can unlink lights from geometry just by selecting the geometry and choosing the light you don't want it to link up to anymore. Link them back, just select it again, and it will link automatically back in. So again, Windows, relationship editor, light linking. Right now we're in object-centric. We could be in light-centric, which I can actually change inside the editor. Now, one thing you'll notice here, you'll see particles and shading groups. And for example, if I had an AI standard surface, that AI standard surface would be here. We do not link or unlink materials. That's a really easy way to get really, really messed up. And a lot of times people will do it accidentally, not realize that their lights are not affecting a material. And you could have that material assigned to the entire scene, which is what we do with the AI standard, right? We put one in there and that covers all of our objects. Problem is, you unlink that AI standard material, it basically ignores the light completely. So nothing will be illuminated. So to make it simple, we stick to lights and objects. Does that make sense? Good. All right, so let's put into practice what we've got going on here. So let's pull, let me get my plane here, and let's scale it up. Get my sphere, let's pull it up out of the ground, just 1 unit, so it sits on it. All right, so that's still got Lambert. Now my sphere has the AI standard, so let me turn off the weight. Let's put the specular weight at 0, and now the base color value at 0.5. And I'm going to right click on my plane and assign existing material. Now I got to pull up here. When I do that, assign existing material, AI standard. There we go. So let me pull my area light up out of the ground. Let's kind of aim it down. Let's pull my spotlight up out of the ground. And let's kind of spin that around. And for fun, let's use the center of interest here. All right, so what I'm going to do here is let's give this a little bit of illumination. Then let's give this some illumination. All right, so now you can see my spotlight is on the sphere and it's also on the plane. Now, what if I like the way the spotlight looks? In fact, let me kind of lower that a bit. Let's make it so it's more of a rim light. Let's kind of pull it around a little bit. There we go. So now I kind of got that little rim light going on there. I like that, but I don't like that light pattern on the ground. It washes out my shadow and makes everything look kind of, well, unpleasing and not very professional looking. It looks a little sloppy. So what I want to do is I want to unlink my spotlight from the ground. Why? Because I don't want it to illuminate. I want it to ignore the ground and only illuminate the sphere. So I get that rim light. Now, best way to do that, light linking. So let's go back up to Windows, Relationship Editor, light linking, light centric. I like light centric. That's how I think. So it's my spotlight. I select my spotlight. I see it's linked up to the plane and the sphere. Let me deselect it from the plane. So now it's still illuminating the sphere, but not the plane. Now, if I unlink it from the sphere, I basically turned it off. So I could do the same thing with the area light. I mean, I could say, ignore the plane, and then my sphere would be floating in air, basically. Could ignore the sphere, and I get a big void there, no shadow. And once you link everything back up, if it still doesn't look right, stop your IPR and re-render. Now, notice I stopped it, re-rendered, nothing happened. I'm going to close. My Arnold render view, let's open it again and let's re-render. There we go. So when you're working with light linking, occasionally it does not update properly. So stop your IPR, close your render view, open it again, kick off a render. All right, so that's a very simple example of using light linking to get the result I want. All right, questions? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
All right, thanks, Will. Anybody else? Michael's good. Tyra's good. Derek is good. Thank you. Keely's good. All right. So let's take a look at what we're doing for project. Don't save. Project 2. All right, now the portrait already has the appropriate AI standard surface materials assigned. Do not change the materials or the scene will not render properly. If you change the materials, you're going to break the subsurface scattering. You'll break the connection with the texture that is assigned to that AI standard. So that's for the portrait. For the rabbit or the still life, that is considered your still life. There you know it's a rabbit. It's a still life. You will assign the AI standard material to all the objects in the scene. That includes the backdrop, the rabbit, all the parts and elements of the still life. Don't forget you need to turn off specular weight. Make the base color 50% gray or 0.5 value. Verify color management is turned on in your rabbit or still life. If you do not do that, light will not behave properly. Make sure cast shadows is turned on. Turning cast shadows on will make sure that you have appropriate shadows. All right, take a screenshot. We just had Florence join us. I want to make sure we get everybody for attendance. Okay. So you're going to be working with IPR, obviously, for quick feedback. And the idea is you will be doing and using the lighting breakdowns that we give you for whichever assignment you choose to do. So for the still life, you have a choice of the Cornell rabbit or the still life. Okay, the workflow for them is right here. We're going to be using Arnold area lights for the key light and fill light for both. Now the rim or the backlight, rim light for the rabbit, backlight here for the still life is going to be a spotlight. You may need to use light linking on this, you may not. For the rabbit, you definitely will because we got a rim here and we would have the exact same problem like we had in that little demo with the sphere. I would have a light pattern on the backdrop that I don't want, and I just want the rim. For the still life, there's an additional backlight behind the candle. For that, you'll use a point light. Remember, we're still dealing with light direction, light intensity, light color, shadow quality, right? Hard shadows, soft shadows. Now, after you're done this, then you can move on to the portrait. For the portrait, you'll download the portrait guide that we have a link to. We went over in the first part of lecture. it must contain more than one light. You can add as many lights as you need after it, but your reference must have at least two. But for example, here in this little demo that I did, I wound up using 3 lights because my key light made the backdrop too bright and I wanted to control it separately. So I used a separate light to control the backdrop so I could get my key light on the subject, illuminate it like the reference, and then I can move my rim light around and not worry about it. So like I said, the scene already has the AI standard assigned to the head. It's got subsurface scattering and a texture map, and also to the backdrop. Now, whichever one you choose to do, the rabbit or the still life, that will determine which scene you open inside your Maya project folder. So let's take a look at the little packet of love that we give you guys for today. So here's the still life. And let me get rid of that. So you have a Maya scene file for the Cornell rabbit, one for the still life, whichever one you choose to do. There's a Photoshop template. We've got one template, but if you open the template in Photoshop, the still life reference and the rabbit reference are in there, the Cornell rabbit. They're just on different layers. So turn off the reference that you're not using. So if you're doing the still life, you turn off the rabbit. There's your final version of the still life. If you're doing the rabbit, leave that on, pop your render in. You're going to change the, check the watermark opacity. Don't assume it's 15%. And you're going to fill in the area down here. So for the key light, where it says scale, that is the scale of your area light if you scaled it. If you left it at the default at 1, then you put in scale of 1. You can find that. Where can you find scale information in Maya? Anybody? You guys have done this in modeling.
I can't exactly remember off the top of my head.
It's called the channel box layer editor. So if I have a sphere, there's my information. Remember, you got translate, rotate, scale information. There's your scale. Same thing with a light. Create a light. For the Arnold area light, there's your scale. If you scale it up to make it bigger to match the reference, you need to write that scale down for Photoshop. Intensity. Also, we're still tracking camera AA and diffuse samples. And then your render time goes up top here. All right, don't forget, new version of Photoshop. You can't really just come in and do a file save as and make it directly a target. You got to save a copy. Then once you save a copy, then you can come down and save it as a target. You just need to rename it. Ooh, not a SciTech. There was an old blast from the past. Haven't used them in a while. So there you go. Just going to cancel that. Don't really need to have that running. All right, let's quit out of Photoshop. And let's talk about the reference images we give you. So for the still life, we've got 2 sets of reference images, one for the rabbit and one for the still life. So for the rabbit, we give you lighting breakdowns. This is what the key light looks like by itself. Now we go on and do the fill light. You can see the fill light is actually pretty low intensity, very low intensity. Now, over zoom, it may look completely black, but it's not. There's still a little bit of light coming in. This is what the rim light looks like by itself. And then at the end, we give you all three lights together, and that is your final target. But while you are working on one light at a time. Then you move on to the next light. I also give you a couple positional guides, sort of like the lighting guide does. This will show you kind of a front view and a top view of where the lights are, and it will help you with the elevation. So in the beginning, using multiple lights, it can be a little overwhelming. So for this, we've got this for you. So you can get an idea. Your key light's on the right. You can see it's bigger than the fill light, which is on the left side. And here is the spotlight in the back. You can see how high up they are. You can see the area lights lifted up a little bit, and it's pointed down toward the center of the rabbit. Same thing with the fill light. It's pulled back a little further. It's smaller. Center of interest is pretty much right in the center where the rabbit's body is. And here, this is your rim light. Goes right through that ear, kind of right down, maybe just a little bit more forward than the other two lights. Or a little bit off to the left, I should say. Now, if you're doing the still life, here are your reference images. So here's your still life key light coming from the left side. Use the fruit and the bowl shadows as a guide. You can see the cup is brighter than the rest, so that means the light is a little closer to the cup than it is to the rest of the geometry. The fill light coming from the opposite of the key, coming from the right side. We've got a backlight that illuminates a nice little arc here behind, a nice little gradient arc behind the scene. And we've got a little backlight behind the candle because the candle was kind of blending into the backdrop. If you take a look here, you can see some areas where that candle blends right in. So all lights together, that gives you your final light. Now, be careful because some of the lights may have color in them, maybe pretty subtle. So some positional guides, just like with the rabbit. This is kind of a front view. You can see the key light on the left, fill light on the right. There's your backlight, which is behind the bowl of fruit, and the small little backlight behind the candle. There is your point light. And this is where they look like from an overhead shot. So remember, everything is all about the relationship of the subject to the camera and how the light interacts with it. Same thing with the rabbit. Get into those guides. There's our subject. There's the camera. Everything is kind of a relationship to that. So you can sit and you can go, okay, well, this would be 90 degrees. This would be 0 degrees. So 45 degrees would probably be somewhere around here. My light's over here somewhere, so maybe it's like 60 degrees. So then we got the same thing going on over here. So this one might be like 75 degrees. So you can get an idea of that lighting compass to help you kind of figure out where things are and what they're doing. So this is the same kind of deal with the portrait guide. We're trying to figure out where the light is in relationship to the subject. Now, as far as elevation goes, in the portrait guide, you had the nose shadow and you had the highlight in the eye. Well, we don't have anything shiny in the material, and our subject in the still life, or sorry, our subject in the portrait has their eyes closed, so they weren't blinded by the lasers. And you can get an idea with the nose shadow there, but we can't see the highlight of the eye. So a lot of times you kind of have to make a trade-off between the two. So again, elevation will help. All right, so for the portrait, you will get a head. Put all my old renders from previous classes in there. There we go. So you will get Abe Arnold base. Your texture is inside the source images folder. For anybody who's going to be a character artist, there is your future for laying out UVs for a head. Kind of creepy, but there you go. Now, notice we don't give you reference. Why not? Well, you guys are downloading the portrait guide, and you're going to choose one of the reference images that has multiple lights in it. For the template, there's no reference in there because you need to cut your reference out that you're using in Photoshop. So let's see, there we go. So you can see that the portrait guide is pretty much laid out. So it's got these little, they're called tab leaders, little dots that separate each part. You can just crop them right there in Photoshop. So for example, let's pick one that's got multiple lights. So for the example, this one. So crop this one out. This one goes into your reference. On the left, remember, you can scale it up, but don't distort the reference or stretch it. Keep it, keep it so that it is uniform in its scale. Don't want to see any stretched wide heads or any narrow faces. Keep it proportionate. So on the right side, this is where your render goes. And it's a different aspect ratio than any of the scenes we've worked on before. So render setting information on the left, light information on the right. For the portrait, you will need to make sure that in your head, the subsurface scattering material does not have any additional noise. So we're going to be adjusting the subsurface scattering section in the render settings in Arnold. Now, the default of 2 is okay, but you may need to bump it up to 3 or 4. So we'll get into that when we actually get in and work on the portrait. It'll make a lot more sense. But just to show you where it's at, under Arnold, Arnold Renderer, we got SSS, subsurface scattering. So like I said, 2 works okay, but if you've got rim light where you've got light coming through the back of the ear, you may notice in some of the brighter areas where the light's coming through the ear that you get a lot of noise, or it looks like a grainy, almost sandy, gritty looking area. Then you might need to bump this up to 3 or maybe 4. Don't forget, as you increase this, it's going to increase your render time. Now, that goes on top of, you set your camera AA at 4 or 6 or whatever you're doing, the diffuse at 6 or 8, whatever your settings are. And then subsurface scattering is separate from those because it's a different element that we're looking at today. And that's only for the portrait. All right. Any questions so far? Before we get on and demo. So Yangi, Javier, Will, Tyra, the Michaels, Lauren, Kayvon, Kaylee, everybody good? Jackson, Florence, Ekaterina, Derek, Blaine, Ayan. All right, everybody looks good. Thank you very much. Just checking in. All right, so I'm going to demo the rabbit because it utilizes light linking for sure because of that rim light. And I want to show you the workflow. Now, the workflow that I'm going to show for the rabbit works exactly the same for the still life. So let's set project first before I open my scene file. Let's go find it here. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I set my project to Project 3 Still Life Maya project right there. Click on it, hit set, file open, and I'm going to choose the Cornell rabbit. Now, if you get an error, you can ignore the error. I forgot to clean this scene out. I think it had some render or some V-Ray nodes in it when we were testing V-Ray. So don't worry about it, just click OK. Have to clean it out for next month. Cleaned out project 1, seemed to be pretty good. Have to do the same thing for this. Okay, so when you get this scene open, do a save as automatically. This way you do not alter the original. All right, so project 3, Cornell Rabbit. (2021-06), life is good so far. So just like with all the other assignments, I like to work in perspective and render out of the render cam. So there's my render cam. Kind of raised up above the rabbit a little bit, pointed down. Now, first thing you want to do, I've already saved it. Let's select the rabbit and the backdrop. So there's the rabbit, there's the backdrop. I can also just marquee select in the viewport. I don't need the camera. So I want to assign an AI standard material here because by default, this has Lambert. So Shift T, that'll bring up my assign new material, Arnold shader AI standard. We're going to do the same thing we've done for project 2. Take specular, turn the weight off. Under base, color, you want the value to be 0.5, which makes it 50% gray. So now I can hit 5. It looks super dark. Anytime you see something that looks darker than it should, that should tell you, ooh, color management is not on. And remember, that's right here. Rabbit or still life. Let's turn on color management. So color management, how do I find that? Anybody?
Here, I got this.
Okay.
So first off, select everything in your scene except the camera.
Well, you don't need to do that for color management.
Okay. Well, in that case, go over to you go over to file, correct?
Nope.
Oh, Windows. Right.
Windows. There you go. Where am I going?
Settings and preferences.
Okay, good.
Preferences.
Preferences. All right. So, Will, the reason we don't have to select anything is because when you go into preferences, it's for the entire scene automatically.
Oh, okay.
It's only when you're assigning things that you need to select them specifically. All right. So we're in preferences now. Where do we go?
Go down to where it says color management.
Okay. Yep. On the left side under categories, color management.
And right up top, you should see enable color management. Just go ahead and click that.
All right, we got that. And you got to hit save.
Yes.
And
And
now
boom.
we're set. Thank you. All right, so now my scene looks correct. Don't forget to save your scene at this point because you are saving color management into the scene file. The original scene file we gave you did not have color management turned on. So color management's on. Life is good so far. I've got my AI standard assigned to the rabbit, the backdrop. I can go into my render settings and I want to make sure that Arnold is set to be my renderer. So here's the thing. Even if you've got everything else set up, you've got AI standard in there, you've got color management on, if you don't check your renderer and just start rendering, you're going to get Maya. You don't want that. You want Arnold. There we go. Now, save your scene again because now you've changed renderers. So now you've got color management turned on, AI standard material on everything, and Arnold is set up as your renderer. Life is pretty good. So now, let's load in our reference. So to do that, I'm going to open up the Arnold render view. Under File in the Arnold render view, open image. And let's go look for our rabbit. So still life reference. There's my Cornell rabbit. There's my first light. That's my key light. So I click open. And there we go. There's my target. Now, a lot of times, I like to have my additional reference open, which are those positional guides we give you. So I kind of like to have these both open in my preview app. This way I can kind of go back and forth and go, okay, where's my light compared to the reference here? This will give me an aid, a guide as to how big, the position of it, and the elevation. So let's go back. First thing we want to do now is create an AI area light, which is right here, first light in the Arnold shelf. So take a look here. I can see it needs to aim at the rabbit from the left side. So let's pull this out, pull it up a little, and I can see, it's aimed in the opposite direction. So let's rotate it around. Let's pull it out front a little bit. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And let's rotate it a little bit toward the rabbit. Okay, what I'm looking for is to see if it's roughly in the same position. Now, as far as elevation goes, I think I got a little bit of work to do here. Let's pull it up out of the ground. And let's aim it down. Pull this back a little. All right, that's pretty close. It's not going to be 100%, but this will at least get me close to what I want to do. Now, when we start to work here, we're going to work in passes. We're going to light in passes. May sound like a strange concept, but what you're going to do is do the key light first. You're going to get it to about 80 to 85% of the way there. And then you stop. You move on and do the fill light. Do the fill light about 80, 85% of the way there. Then you stop. Go down and do the rim light or the backlight, 80, 85%. Do the other backlight, 80, 85%. Why only 80, 85%? Because as artists, we are perfectionists and we can obsess over every pixel in the scene and never move on. This way, you get assured of progression. So you have to learn to let go. It's close. It's not perfect. Let go. You want to get it about 80, 85% of the way there, then move on to another light. And when you move on to another light, make sure that you turn off the visibility in your previous light. Add it to a display layer and turn off the visibility there. So for example, my key light, I'm going to rename this key. I'm also going to go to my channel box, layer editor, create a brand new layer from my selection. And that's my key. So now when I'm done with this, I can turn visibility off, go on, make a new light, put that on a layer, work on it, turn that off when I'm ready to move on. Again, 80, 85% of the way there ensures that you keep moving forward. So you get done the rim light, 80, 85%, you stop. You go back, put the rim light on a layer, turn it off, go back, do the key. Get it 85, 90, 95% of the way there. Stop, move on. I know it's tempting. Oh, you're so close. It's tempting. Fight the temptation. Do this about 2 or 3 times before you turn all the lights on to see where you're at. I guarantee you're going to be a lot closer than you think if you work this way. Little steps forward. So key light, 80, 85%. Fill light, 80, 85%. Rim light, 80, 85%. Go back, do the key again, do the fill again, do the rim again. So maybe the next time through on the second pass, you got the key. Or maybe not. You got the fill. Great. You got the fill. You don't need to keep doing that, but you check it anyway. So you get the key light, 90%. You get the fill light, you're done. Rim light, you're about 95%. Go back, do the key again. You've already got the fill. You move on to the rim. You finish that one up. Then maybe you stop and go, okay, what does it look like? You turn all the lights on, render it out, see where you're at, take some notes, look at it and go, that key light's still not there. So then you turn all the other lights off, go back, tweak the key. It's going to work for you. So now at this point, I've got my first light in there. Let's see where I'm at. So I want to make sure, for one thing, I'm rendering in my render cam. As far as light position goes, it's pretty close. I mean, I can see my shadow. I can see the bright spot of my light is here. I need some more intensity to be able to see the shadows better. So at this point, I don't know, could double it. Let's go to 10 and see what we get there. All right, so one thing I can see right away, here's my shadows here. My shadows are a little more parallel with the body than they are here, which means I probably have my light a little too far out in front of the body. So you can see the shadow here on the reference comes out a little bit more than mine does. Also, it's not bright enough, but let me tweak the position of the light a little. Let me bring it around to the front a little bit more. So generally what I'm going to do, or actually bring it around to the side a little bit more. So let me just kind of nudge it this way a little bit. So let's see, where's my positional guide there? All right, so let's go back. Okay, I can see, looks like the center of my light interest needs to go right in front of the tail. Mine's pretty close here. So let's move that around back here. All right, so that did move my shadow a little bit. Move it a little bit more. How's that look? All right, that's better. It's a little more to the side now. It's probably a little fat and a little long compared to the reference. But you know what? Let me go on and do my other principles of light. So I got the direction pretty good. Looks like I need a little more intensity. Do I need twice as much? I don't know. I'm not thinking so, but let's try it. Well, I definitely don't need 200% more. So yeah, definitely not twice as much. Let's try that. It's still a little bright. So I'm looking at the intensity right here. It looks pretty close. You can see my shadows are still slightly off a little bit, but I'm going to resist the temptation to obsess about it. And I'm going to call that probably, 75, 80% of the way there. So for this, I'm going to stop, save my scene, turn off my key light. Since I put it on a display layer, let's just turn visibility off. So if I render, I got nothing. So now let's work on the fill light. Work in passes. Don't obsess. All right. Really pretty minimal light. So let's see what we're going to do here. Where's my positional guide? All right, so that is farther away, and you can see it's smaller. So that goes through the center of the head, probably right around here somewhere. So let's create another Arnold area light. Let's bring it over, pull it back. And I can see, well, it's definitely smaller. So let me scale it. Let me pull it up out of the ground. All right, so it definitely needs to aim at the rabbit. So let's do this. Right here, center of the head-ish. Right, so what does that look like here? So that's up, whoa, that's up much higher. That's like right above the rabbit's head. So let's do that. And then aim it down. Okay. So let's see what happens when I render this. And I'm going to leave it at the default intensity so I get an idea of where I am, just like I did with the key light. So let's start rendering, and you can see default light is actually not bad. So just going by the look of my positional guides that we give you guys, you can get really pretty close. Now, my shadows are a little bit off. You can see on the leg here in the front. Looks like I've got a little more light going into the leg. So it kind of tells me I probably need to move my light back a little bit more. Yeah, I think I do. Let's push it back a little bit like this. And let's re-render. Well, a little too much now. All right, so it's pretty close. I call that like 90, maybe 90%. I need a little more intensity, I'm thinking, just a little bit. Mayan looks a little dark. That's too much. Still too much. All right, that's pretty close. So for this, I'm going to call that about 85, 90% of the way there. Right, so display layer, this is going to be my fill light. Save. Let's rename that. Rename your lights as you go. It's going to make your life so much easier. All right, so I've got my fill light in there, my key light in there. Let's get the rim light. So let's open image. Let's pop in the rim light. All right. Just trying to get a feel for it. All right, so let's turn off visibility for our rim light. We're going to use a spotlight. Okay, that works for me. Spotlight it is. So create lights spot. There's my spotlight by default. It's got to go behind the rabbit. So let's put it back here. How far back? You know what? Almost looks like it's a 45-degree back. Let's rotate. And it looks like the cone's a little bit bigger. Let's see what it looks like here. All right, center comes up out of the ground more, obviously. Looks like it goes right into the center of the chest. And to make that wider, that's going to be my cone angle. Let me rename this. It's going to be my rim. And let's go into the attributes of the light. So that's my cone. And how big to make it? I don't know, just going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's do that. Let's try that. Ultimately, it's going to be, what does it look like when I render? All right, so let's see what happens when we hit the render button. So I can see I've got some rim here, but you can notice right away that I've got this light pattern on the ground plane. So the ground plane, I don't want to illuminate it. That's not in my reference. So as far as position goes, it doesn't look too bad. I'm seeing a rim here. Definitely need more intensity. So let's give it a little more intensity. And this is a job for light linking. So I don't want my rim light to affect my backdrop. So to do that, I need to use light linking. So I need to go up to Windows, Relationship Editor, Light Linking, Light Centric. Now in the Relationship Editor is kind of weird. Because if I select my light and I've got my group here, if I open my group, it doesn't look like anything's illuminated. So select another light, go back and select it. And now, since I have the group open, it'll show me everything's highlighted. So you can see all my lights are linked to all my geometry. So it's a little bit of a inconsistency in the way the Relationship Editor handles groups. Expand the group, then select the light. Or if you select the light, expand the group, nothing, select it, click off to another light, click back. Now, all I want to do is click on the rim light, select the backdrop so it deselects. So now when I render, I have my backdrop ignoring my light. Does that make sense so far? So now there's one other issue here. And right now you can see in my rim light, I don't have any bounce light coming off the rabbit and hitting the ground plane. That is indirect light. So what I need to do, so I can close my Relationship Editor right now. What I need to do is select my spotlight and go down to visibility. That's under Arnold. So you can see under diffuse, specular, subsurface scattering, indirect. So if I turn off diffuse, it turns everything off. That's not what I want. What I want is indirect. I don't want the light to bounce any indirect light into the scene. So I turn off indirect. And now my light matches the reference a whole lot closer. We're getting there. It's still not bright enough, and we got this other weird stuff going on over here, which we'll talk about in a second. So we're solving one problem at a time. So first we had to unlink the light from the backdrop. Then we had to turn off indirect illumination in the light under the Arnold rollout under visibility. That way we don't get light bleeding back onto the backdrop like that. So again, we turn off that. Needs to be a little brighter. That's easy to fix. Let's go up here, crank it up a little more. Now it looks like my light's kind of bleeding around to the side a little bit too much. So looks like I need to bring that back a little. Yeah, it needs to come around the front. Yeah, I'm just going to pull it forward just ever so slightly. Could be a little brighter still, I think. All right, let's crank it up a little more. All right, not bad. So now, well, let's talk about what's going on here. So here's mine. There's my reference. So in my reference, I've got some extra light here, over here, over here. And it spreads a little bit more over the back. So what's causing that? Oh, and even in here in the toes. All right, now you have to think about light and how it reacts on a surface that's organic. So we go outside in the sun, we put our hand up to block the sun when we look up at the sky, right? When we do that, we are obscuring the sun from us, and we are actually creating a shadow on our face to block the sun. Our bodies create self-shadowing all the time. So what's happening here with the rabbit is the rabbit's body is shadowing the back leg, the tail, and the back ear, or I should say the right ear. So for this light, we can do a little basically wizardry, voodoo, and we can basically turn shadows off on this light. Now, what that will do is keep the rabbit from self-shadowing and give us the effect of having a little extra kick light somewhere. So for this, we go under not shadows, but we go under Arnold. And under Arnold, we turn off cast shadows. So once we do that, we get all of the extra goodies that we see in our reference. Does that make sense? For this light only, we're doing all kinds of stuff. We're breaking rules left and right. We're unlinking it from the backdrop. We are turning off indirect light so it doesn't bounce around. And we're actually telling it to not cast shadows so we can get a little bit of extra light in our rim. Right, does that make sense? Questions? Okay, Michael says no. Everybody else is just in a stupor. Okay, just checking.
All good here.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure I didn't lose anybody. All right, so now what I would do at this point is turn off the rim light, go back, work on the key. But for the sake of brevity and for me pushing forward, because I want to get to work on the portrait a little bit, I'm going to show you guys, I'm not happy with this. This is not complete, but I want to show you it's probably a lot closer to being done than I think, or maybe even you think. So let me get rid of some of this here. Let's go back. And what I want to do is let's load in our reference, which is the final reference. All right, so open image. There's our final. So this is all lights together. So now at this point, I'm going to go back. First off, let me throw the rim light on a layer. Turn off visibility. There we go. Okay, good. All right, so let's turn all lights on. And let's do a render. All right, so definitely key light is off. I can see that right away. But the rest of the scene is not bad. I mean, the key light's on the right planet. Mine's a little long, so that means I need to raise my light up a little bit to kind of shorten that shadow. And it's a lot easier to see that shadow with the fill light in there. But you can see my fill light is very close. My rim light is very close also. Now my rim light. Yep, looks like I need to position my key light a little bit different. Like I said, and the rim light, I still may go back and tweak a little. So right now I'm seeing a little too much light on the back compared to here, but I can get all that by soloing that light, meaning I stop, turn off all my lights, go back, work on just the key light, load the reference in again for the key, work on that, then go back, do the rim light. Maybe I'm happy with the fill, it looks okay. So maybe the rim light and the key light are the two I work on. I have a feeling it's going to take me a couple shots to get the key and maybe just one more for the rim. But this is the workflow I want you to use for the still life and also for the portrait. Now you may say, okay, well, we don't have breakdowns for the portrait. No, you don't. But when you're working on multiple lights, you want to go do the key light first. Then you work on either the fill or the backlight or whatever it is you're working on. Work on those other lights and come back to the key. And you want to try and do them in passes also so you move forward. Because it's really easy to get stuck when you're lighting, worrying about perfection. All right, questions? Does that make sense? Okay, everybody's good. Okay, all good. Awesome. so let me save. Let's close. And let's figure out which one we want to do for the portrait. Now, if anybody's interested in, no, let me close that. There we go. All right, so if anybody's interested in the multicolored one, I did that last month. So that one, I'm definitely going to say, no, we're not doing that. But what I want to do is give you guys a chance to pick another one out that we can kind of work on and at least get you guys into the workflow for this. All right, so let me pull this up a little. All right, there we go. All right, so which one should we do today? Remember, it's got to have more than one light. Anybody got a preference? Loop with a rim light? We got Jackson.
I'm fine with anything.
Okay, Will's good with anything. We got a loop with a rim, which is basically this one right here. All right, I'll hear any other votes. So loop with a rim would be cool. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to do that. What I would do normally is go into Photoshop and cut it out, but it so happens that I have it cut out already, just from past demos. So I actually have a folder full of the lighting guide. Split to fill. Here we go. Loop with a rim. That's the one we're going to use. So let's open that up. Now you're going to notice I'm not going to bring this into Arnold. For one thing, this is a JPEG, or actually it's a Targa, but I made the Targa from a JPEG, which is not really got color management turned on. I'm just going to look at it outside of Maya and compare it as best I can. All right, so first thing I want to do, set my project. It's a brand new Maya project folder. So it's portrait. You want to open or set your project to the portrait Maya project Arnold. Click on that, hit set. Let's go file open. There's our subsurface scattering head. It's going to open up. Errors have occurred. Just ignore them. Click OK. Again, I like to work in perspective. So if I hit 6 on the keyboard, you'll sort of see what the head looks like with the texture on it. You're not really going to see the subsurface scattering part until you render. So for this, honestly, I like working in wireframe. It's quicker, and I'm not distracted by the color. So what I want to do is just kind of line up, just like I have done for the rabbit. Here I've got an overhead shot. So always go with the key light. Now, analyze your image. So we did this a little bit inside the first part of lecture. So there is my shadow for the nose. And here's that horizon line right here. My light is slightly above it. So what I want to do is set my light up. It looks like it's 45 degrees left. It looks pretty big. You want to scale your light based on how big it looks in your scene. So first thing I want to do, create an Arnold area light. There we go. Oops, I don't want to do that. So let's kind of pull it back. Ooh, how far away is it? Let's rotate it. trying to get it about 45 degrees. There's 90, there's that. Let's try that. Not too bad. All right. Well, definitely it's got to come up because it has to be slightly above the head, and slightly could be, what does he say? Or the photographer. Angle it so the edge, it catches the edge of the light. Okay. So let's aim it down a little bit. So now let's see what that looks like when we hit the render button. Nope, want that. Come on, there we go. All right, so you'll notice this is a vertical or a portrait. So let's hit the render button. Give it a couple seconds. That wheel of death spinning there means that it is converting the skin texture for use in the renderer. So it's there, but needs more energy. So I'm going to go with my default. Usually like to go like 100. And you can see that the skin really starts to light up the more energy you throw at it. So at 1, it looked pretty bleak. Let's just go to 10, see what that looks like. No, I said 10, not 0. There we go. So what I'm looking for is to kind of match the shadow angle for the nose. Now, if the shadow is too long, that means my light is probably too far around to the side. Looks like the elevation actually is not bad. Trying to get that. Yep, it's definitely too long. It's meeting up the shadow on the cheek. All right, so let's move this. Let's just bring it around to the front a little more. And you can see as I bring it around to the front, it makes the shadow shorter. Right, so now that I've moved it around like this, maybe it looks like it's aimed down a little too much. So bring that up. So you can see moving my shadow. All right, so you can see all the noise in the subsurface scattering part of the skin here. All right, so that's actually not too bad. That's pretty close. So remember, if your shadow is too horizontal across your face, you need to raise it up. If it's too short, you need to push it around to the side more. Mine was way too long, which meant I had it way around the side, too much like that. Now, as far as intensity goes, so light position, not bad. But I can see right away, I need to add a little more light on the subject. Why? Because I want to kind of get these little bits of highlight here that I sort of have going on. I need a little more light intensity, but what that's going to do is it's going to completely ruin the backdrop. So what I want to do here is first, let's give it a little more energy. Let's see what happens when I do this. All right, so that's a little too much. That's a little too much glare on the top of the head there. So let's back that off. So one of the common problems is that students will usually underexpose it, meaning make it a little too dark. So let's knock that down a little more. So I'm trying to make it nice and bright, but not be overexposed, meaning it's all blown out here on the side. So that's a little better. Now remember, we got a female face here, a little more delicate in structure. We got a bigger, beefier male head here, so it's wider features. So we're not going to get the exact same kinds of highlights. All right, so that's not bad. Now, one thing I'm pretty sure of, I'm going to have to unlink my key light from the backdrop. All right, let me save as. Why? Because I should have saved as at the beginning. Portrait 2021-06. Good. That makes me happy. Got it saved. Life is pretty good now. All right, so I'm going to unlink my light from the backdrop because I want to start working on my rim. So relationship, actually, let me rename this so I know it's my key. There's my key light. Go up to Windows, relationship editors, light linking, light centric, key light. Let's deselect it from the backdrop. Let's render. There we go. So now what I can do is work on my rim light and then add a light in for my backdrop to get this kind of vignette effect. What kind of light would I use? I could use pretty much anything. I could try a spotlight, really low level, really soft. I could try a area light, a disc light, something low level light. Let's get the rim in there. And that rim is going to be a spotlight. So let's create lights, spot. And it's going to be toward the back. Let's flip it around 180 degrees. And yeah, I can guarantee it's going to be way too low. So that might be a little high. Let's do this. Let's try making it level with the head just for fun. And let's do the T key and get that center of interest. And let's swing it around to the side just a little. So let's hit the render button. And I'm definitely going to need more energy here. All right, so you can see I added, and then now I can start to see my ear a little bit. So, you know, I'm going to go for broke. Let's go really big there. All right, so now you can start to see that the light is passing through the ear. Now, I got a little bit of rim here on the bottom. Yep, hair is very interesting, Javier, because hair catches light and kind of really, you know, reflects it, lets it through. And the whole idea with this is, unfortunately, our subject does not have hair. All right, so what I want to do, get back onto this so I don't run out of time. I would need to get my rim around the side a little more because I need it above the ear and I need it on the jaw a little bit more. So let me just try moving it around until I start to get some light. So notice if I bring the light down or bring it up, well, let's put it right around there. So let's see if I can get that right behind the ear a little bit more. So I'm trying to see where that highlight is, like the super bright part. Again, is it up there? If I do that, I don't get much light down here. So let me try lowering it a little. Somewhere around here, maybe. Now notice, I don't want that light bouncing around on the backdrop. So I'm going to unlink my rim light from my backdrop also. So there's my rim. Let's unlink that. Let's re-render it. So I'm still going to get, and that really didn't do anything. I've got my indirect light bouncing onto my backdrop. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the rabbit. I'm going to go back and turn my light linking back on for my spot. And let's go down under Arnold, under visibility. And let's take indirect and turn that off. Ah, there we go. So now that's a little bright. Let's cut that. So it's going to take a little bit of time. You can see it's super bright around here. And that's kind of what I'm trying to match. Now here, this is where I was talking about subsurface scattering on the ear, right here in this area. So this will clean up pretty good, but it's done rendering, but you can see there's still a lot of noise in there. So to clean up that noise in the ear, oops, I want you. Let's try cranking this up to like 3. We're adding more samples for subsurface scattering, and hopefully that will help clean it up. That helped a little bit. Let's try 4. All right, now you may see some in the specular also, because the skin has some specular properties in it. So my subsurface scattering doesn't look bad, but I'm seeing a little bit of noise here right on that specular part. So let's try cranking that up a little. Just trying to clean that up a little. Now, this will clean up when I go to denoise it also. So you can see you're going to have to kind of mess around with subsurface, just give it a little bit more. And of course, I didn't crank my camera AA up. So when I'm doing a final render, I would put that up and then start working my way through subsurface scattering. All right, so now for the backlight, I'm just kind of roughing these lights in for you guys. So for the backlight, let me just grab, you know what, I'm going to make an Arnold. Let's make an Arnold area light. And, well, let's make it a disc just for fun. All right, so you can see I just threw that light back there and it's a little better. Now, as far as the brightness goes, it looks like it's mostly bright around here. And it could probably use a little more intensity. And I could probably use some deep, dark blue in there as well. I could probably use a little more intensity. And for the light color, I don't know, let's do that. No, I don't like that. Let's make it really deep. And probably that was a little on the purple side. And I probably want to desaturate it a little because it's sort of grayish in color. Yeah, it's probably got too little value. Let's pull that up a little. So closer, I'd need to tweak that a little bit, but you guys get the idea. And I also might want to make that a little bigger because I need some more light on the left side. So let's scale it up a little. Maybe give it a little more intensity. Yeah, I definitely have to tweak that color. I don't like that. It's desaturated some more. All right, it's a little closer. All right, so this is sort of the same workflow. Like I worked on the key light. I got that pretty close. I probably would go back and tweak it a little bit. Maybe add a little more energy. Maybe it's a little big. The shadow's a little bit on the harder side or on the reference. My rim light, that's not bad. I probably would go back and tweak it a little bit more and then kind of work on trying to get that backlight to show up. So even though the photographer did not use a backlight, they got that light for free. We don't. We got to match what we see in the render. All right, so does the workflow make sense? Questions? Make sense? Everybody's good. Taking a last screenshot for attendance. Kayvon's a little confused, but go over it again in the archive. Okay, fair enough. Ion's good. All right, Derek is good. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to ask one more time before we go. Hang on a second. Let me pull out my participants here. All right, so let me go down, make sure nobody planned on coming into campus lab. So Yangi, Javier, Will, Tyra, Ricardo, Nicholas, Michael, Lauren, Kayvon, Kaylee, Janelle, Jackson, Florence, Ekaterina, Derek, Blaine, Ion, anybody plan on coming in to campus lab this afternoon? All right, so no plans?
I'm not even on campus yet.
Okay, so I just want to make sure because I'm going to tell Frank and Ari to stay home and run lab for you guys. Right, so everybody understands that. So when you come back to lab, just stay where you're at basically, and we'll run a Zoom lab for you guys, okay? All right, so let's go to lunch because I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. It's probably lunchtime somewhere in the world. All right, so let's see. Let's come back we'll get out of here 11:10. So come back to lab at 12:10. No, so ignore that. I don't know how that got in there. That was from last month. We got campus labs and lectures on campus all days of the week. Okay. So let's save this. And I will see you guys back here at 11:10, or sorry, 12:10. Have a good lunch.